I'm going to be analysing the music video Riptide by Vance Joy, and this is a really interesting video to have a look at because you'll find that it's probably quite different than a lot of the music videos that are out at the moment and that you've seen in the past. And one of the reasons for this is that it follows an indie folk genre. It's an independent video, which means that it is slightly lower budget. It was made at the start of Vance Joy's career. It was the song that has put him out there and that has made him famous, and his words were that it's the song that snowballed and became something that was popular, that maybe he hadn't expected to become so popular as it is. So an independent music video, we would expect to have a lower budget than a more mainstream artist. It also has a lower budget than some subsequent videos by this artist. So he has employed this avant-garde, surreal, experimental, artistic style in the ways that he has portrayed certain things, certain people, events, and fragmented narrative in this video. And this is a very conscious decision, and it's kind of a genius decision, because if you don't have a large budget to achieve a narrative that you might want to put out there, then experimenting with different influences and different images is something that will engage an audience. It is seemingly subversive to some of the codes and conventions that we would expect to find in a music video. If we consider theory of music video, you would find suggestions like the lyrics will fit with the narrative, they will complement the narrative, the artist will appear as the protagonist or as the main thread going throughout the video, and there will be a very distinct relationship between the persona of the artist and the video itself. The one way that it does complement this theory is the suggestion that the visuals are extremely important in order to build an image of the artist and of the song. And the visuals in Riptide are really, really interesting. So we're going to have a look at some of the sequences, and we're going to have a look at some of the cultural references and try to analyse some of the signs and signifiers in this music video. So some of our basic fact sheet information to begin with. The artist is Vance Joy. His real name is James Keogh. That's for interest only. You're not necessarily going to need to know that in the exam. The directors of the video are Dimitri Basil and Laura Gurran. The video was released in May 2013 and it was released worldwide, and it was Vance Joy's debut single, and I'm not sure how many views it has on YouTube to date, but it is in the millions and it is a very popular video. The genre is indie folk or indie pop, and if you have a look at some of the interviews with Vance Joy, he will talk about how this genre of music has influenced his style and how his interest in playing the ukulele is sparked from the fact that he is replicating some of the traits of the folk genre from his student days, from his university days of pursuing music over and above his initial dream of becoming a lawyer. The fact that this video has two directors places it seemingly as something more like a film, and there are certainly a lot of film influences as we look at some of the visuals throughout the video. This clearly links with studies into semiotics and into intertextual cultural references, and also these are things that Godwin, in his theory of music videos, says that audiences like to identify different references, different cultural texts being used to inform some of the ideas in the video. Let's have a look at some of these and how some of these are used. And there are lots of film references. There are lots of cult film references in one way or another, and there are lots of allusions to different directorial styles of film. So we could suppose that this video is primarily for entertainment purposes and is doing something quite different, is experimenting with a bit of a mishmash of different genres and different styles in, as we said before, a postmodern avant-garde way. Probably the most famous, most standout-ish intertextual reference is the line, the closest thing to Michelle Pfeiffer that you've ever seen, with the image of the woman who isn't Michelle Pfeiffer but certainly looks like and symbolically resembles Michelle Pfeiffer. And again, Vance Joy himself says that this is the one lyric, this is the thing that people ask him about the most. Why Michelle Pfeiffer? Why choose her out of all the celebrities and actresses that you could have talked about, you could have sung about? And he says, well, you know, this probably was to him as a younger person watching films, this was the embodiment of what it meant to be a beautiful woman. So it's kind of personal reference. It's maybe something a little bit autobiographical, maybe it's something that reveals a little bit about the artist himself and his perception of mainstream celebrity beauty. While we're talking about film in general, you've got the shot at the beginning of the sky, the very stereotypical building block style establishing shot that we see in many films, particularly independent film, usually associated with a dreamer, somebody thinking about something a bit larger than themselves or contemplating life. So it begins with that kind of style and it leads the audience to expect that this is going to be similar to the progression that a film takes. There are also various allusions to Wes Anderson's symmetrical directorial style. Wes Anderson is a director who is known for his innovative, creative, artistic and sometimes surreal style of filming. So again, to align yourself with that sort of art gives a little bit more information about some of the ideas and some of the intentions behind these images that have been used in this music video. And there's a kind of low angle shot, again, that is symmetrical to that used in the film The Wicker Man. Again, this is us supposing and making these cultural references and recognising some of these cult images and forming connections. There's also reference to the film Midnight Cowboy, which is experimenting with themes and ideas from the Western genre. So if we were going to have a look at this from a theoretical perspective and from a critical media perspective, there is the issue of female representation. And this video doesn't offer a clear-cut, easy to understand guide to women in the media. Instead, what it does do, through a filtered lens, is to look at how women are viewed in the media, particularly in past media and in the films that it's referencing. The attention to female objectification is so obvious and is so overt, it is almost as though our attention as the audience is being drawn to how obvious and how overt female objectification in the media has been. If we were to apply the male gaze theory, it's almost too easy to, by the choice of close-ups of legs, of shots from behind, and the lack of personality that we see. It's almost too easy to apply this theory, which makes me wonder whether that is the intention in the first place, whether the audience are being encouraged by overexposure to these shot types and these images to consider the frequency that they see them and don't question them within the media. It's also perhaps implicit reference to films by Alfred Hitchcock, for example, with this idea of scopophilia, of spying on, of stalking, and of just looking at particular parts of women as though they were objects rather than people. Again, we can bring in film theory and film influence if we think about something like the Kuleshov effect, where the audience are encouraged to view certain images in a particular way. So as the audience, we have no choice but to objectify women through the choice of shots that we are being assigned. Moving on to look at genre. Now this is quite complex in Riptide because we have got a mixture of different genres that we're being exposed to in quite quick succession by fast-paced editing. So we've got Western, we've got horror, we've got thriller, we've got spy, we've got romance, and it's all within the space of this 3-minute video. So all of these genres are intermingled, creating a sense of confusion with the amount of hybrid that we are being exposed to, and making it difficult to form a straightforward genre analysis of what we're seeing in front of us. And again, that is probably the intention. This video primarily is offering us an avant-garde, a surreal, an experimental experience, and this mix of different genres is giving us exposure to many different film influences all at the same time. So it is quite a visual spectacle, and it's difficult to unpick in a straightforward way, and it's difficult to analyse just by focusing on one single thread. And alongside the different genres, you have jump cuts, you have montage editing, which gives the audience a lot of information all at once without them really being able to process what they have previously seen in any amount of depth and detail. And this postmodern approach to narrative structure really pushes the boundaries of straightforward expectations of narrative. So we don't really comfortably have our Todorov's equilibrium, disequilibrium, re-equilibrium narrative. We don't really have a sense of cohesion, and we don't have a sense of beginning, middle and end. In fact, what we have is what is called an intellectual montage, where as the audience we are trying to form connections between seemingly unrelated images, and we're trying to understand how these could fit together purposefully in terms of structure and in terms of storyline. And again, the fact that they don't fit together purposefully and the fact that it's offering us a barrage of different stories and different genres and different characters is part of the appeal and part of the art of this music video. Whilst overall the video seems to reject a cohesive and a coherent narrative, there are particular aspects of it where a story does seem to pan out, be it for a few seconds. And this is a way for the audience to regroup and recapture their thoughts, and again try to decipher some kind of deliberate intention behind the visuals that are taking place. This is all very postmodern, this is all very surreal, it's all very experimental, as we've said before, but that again is most of the appeal of what we are seeing in front of us, deciphering maybe how cultural we are in terms of how well we understand the intertextual references, thinking about those that we don't understand and maybe trying to discover reasons why. So there are many different aspects of media language that you can analyse within the structures of this video as well. We've talked about editing, we've talked about the jump cuts and the montage. You should probably try to pull out various different shot types. Again, we've discussed the close-ups and extreme close-ups of parts of the woman, the disconnection between the woman being a person and the woman being an object as shown by the way the shot is composed. There are different codes that you can analyse if you are applying Barthes' theory of semiotics. You've got your symbolic codes, for example, where you have the line, "All my friends are turning green," with the visual image of the dollar bills on the screen. Now, the connotations of this is that, quite literally the dollar bills are green, or you could consider the fact that green is associated with envy, so maybe it could be that his friends are jealous. So the connotations of the lyrics combined with the visuals, again, might lead to polysemy, more than one interpretation of what we're seeing in front of us. There aren't supposed to be any clear-cut answers with postmodern texts like this one. Polysemy is a really important part of finding your way through a text like this, looking at the different interpretations, and maybe it means all of them and maybe it means none of them, but exploring them is the key, and exploring them is the interesting thing to do with this piece of artwork. And it really puts into practice what Barthes says about myth, about the associations that we make with objects that are essentially arbitrary. They don't have a fixed meaning until we come along and place a meaning onto those. And that is what we are trying to do consistently in this video. All of the objects are myths. None of them necessarily have any meaning until the audience come along and try to fix and assign either intertextual meaning, lyrical meaning, or cultural meaning to these objects. If we take the lolly sticks, for example, so I'm talking about becoming unstuck, that could be quite literal, it could be metaphorical. It is something that is interesting for the audience to decide for themselves. As well as this, Enigma codes are rife throughout this video, where we see the woman running. Again, seems to go alongside the lyrics quite comfortably, running to the Riptide. But we don't see her, we see her back, we see her feet, we see her legs, and the purpose for her running we never quite get to know and we don't understand. There are lots of unanswered questions that go alongside the scenarios that we're confronted with. In particular, where the singer at the end seems to be undergoing quite a mental downward spiral with her makeup smudged and the words becoming unclear and the words on the screen not matching up with what we're hearing. Again, we could be associating this with the pressure felt particularly by women to look a certain way, to perhaps look like Michelle Pfeiffer, as referenced earlier in the video, and we could maybe interpret this as the mental decline of somebody who feels this pressure in this society to perform and to look and to be a certain way. I don't know, it's an interpretation, as is everything that goes along with this video, and I think that's what it's really important to note. We could sit and talk about each individual image, we could liken it to something that has gone before, we could think about the films that it's referencing quite explicitly and talk about why. But really, I think this video is a piece of artwork. It is an avant-garde, postmodern, experimental expression. And that doesn't mean that the messages about women or money or friendships or the references to genre are any less significant. But it is a music video, and if we consider one of the primary purposes of a music video to be an expression of the artist and to be a piece of artwork in itself, then we might appreciate that it is something to be enjoyed and discussed, but that there are no decisive answers and reasons and right and wrong ways to analyse what we're seeing in front of us. And maybe that's the intention. So what I would do is have a look at Riptide again, jot down any ideas, any links that you think you can make regarding genre, regarding the way that the lyrics fit alongside the footage, or the way that it's actually constructed and composed and put together, some of the shot types that are used. Do make some analysis, do make some interpretation of why you think this might be the case, and do take some advice from this video about directors from the past, about concepts that Vance Joy may be trying to emphasise, but use your own ideas as well, because that is the purpose of the myth, that is the purpose of the arbitrary sign, to interpret using your cultural background and your understanding of some of these signs, making your own significance out of these as well. And the other good piece of advice is to compare this to other mainstream music videos, to see if you can identify the differences between the ways shots are used, the ways editing is used, the way that the artist, the persona of the artist, comes across in other videos in comparison to this one.